downpours through the afternoon. Some brighter and drier spells for the Midlands, for central parts of England, but it stays cloudy, damp and fairly cool for East Anglia in the southeast. At best, 17 or 18 Celsius, I think, here, and 15 to 18 degrees elsewhere, but at least it'll feel more pleasant with some brightness in between the showers. Showers or longer spells of rain move through southern parts of the UK overnight, and some persistent rain there for northeast Scotland for the first half of the night as well. For many, again, clear spells in between the showers, and it's a cool night to come with temperatures dipping into the mid to high single figures in most spots. So for the start of Tuesday, some persistent rain close to the northeast of England, southeast Scotland. Showers from the word go across central and southern England, and really it's another day of sunshine and showers with the heaviest downpours for the southern half of the UK, with the risk of hail and thunder in places, and temperatures getting up to 15 to 18 Celsius. Into the evening on Tuesday, the showers continue for a time. Eventually the focus for showers pushes east, drier and brighter weather for a time from the west, with clear spells developing overnight, and another cool night to come. Now Wednesday's a blustery day with a strong breeze and some outbreaks of rain in the north. Thursday and Friday, further showers to come.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues of the day we need to be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one's going to be cancelled for saying exactly what they think. Keeping me company today is Christopher Hope, Associate Political Editor at The Daily Telegraph. And here's what we've got coming up on the show. A former Tory MP is to be sentenced later for the sexual abuse of a teenage boy. Meanwhile, around 1 in 7 MPs have been accused of sex crimes. Is it time for Westminster to clean up its act? Plus, those at risk of monkeypox infection are told to isolate for up to 3 weeks. Could this see the return of COVID-style lockdowns? And would you be happy to eat food made from gene-edited crops? The government thinks it could help tackle the global food crisis. Critics say it amounts to frankenfood. That's what we're discussing for the next hour. What do you need to get off your chest? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet the programme @GBNews. First, though, it's time for the GB News headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister says he doesn't want to introduce new taxes to ease the cost of living crisis. But as pressure grows to introduce a windfall tax on oil and gas companies, Boris Johnson says no option is off the table. Speaking at a school in South East London, he suggested more support will be offered to help households.
I'm not attracted intrinsically to new taxes, but as I've said throughout, we've got to do what we can, and we will, to look after people through the aftershocks of COVID, through the current pressures on energy prices that we're seeing post-COVID and with what's going on in Russia.
Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer says the Prime Minister isn't moving fast enough.
I think there's a range of things that need to be looked at, and reinstating universal credit is one of them. There's all sorts of work that needs to be done on benefits as well. But the windfall tax is a simple solution which could be voted through Parliament very easily. It's Labour's plan. We'll vote for it if the government brings it forward. But dithering and delaying is actually the thing that's stopping people getting that money to help them with their bills, because £600 for those that need it most will make a huge, huge difference.
Well, meanwhile, Downing Street has confirmed that the meeting that took place between Boris Johnson and Sue Gray while she was investigating lockdown rule breaches was first suggested by Number 10. Officials say they asked for a meeting to discuss the timings and publication progress of her findings. Labour claims the meeting was an attempt to undermine the report. Contact tracing is underway following the first confirmed case of monkeypox in Scotland. At least 20 of the virus cases have been identified now in England. The government has advised that people at high risk of catching the infection are to isolate for 21 days. The UK Health Security Agency says anyone who's had unprotected direct contact with a confirmed case shouldn't travel and should avoid pregnant women, children and the immunosuppressed. A health worker's been arrested on suspicion of poisoning a child who died at Birmingham Children's Hospital. The 27-year-old woman who was arrested on Thursday has since been released pending further inquiries. She's also been suspended by the hospital. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she was forced to sign a false confession before being allowed to leave Iran. Speaking to Emma Barnett on BBC Women's Hour, the British Iranian national says it happened in front of a UK government witness and it was filmed. Ms Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she expects Tehran to use it against her in the future.
I'm sure they will show that someday.
Of you signing a confession?
Of me signing it, even though it was under duress. And I just want to put it here...
on the record?
On the record, that all the forced confessions that we have been exposed to, they have no value. They are just propaganda for the Iranian regime to show how scary they are and they can do whatever they want to do.
A review into children's services has warned thousands more will end up in care unless there's a radical reset of the system in England. The independent review of children's social care says more than £2.5 billion of investment over the next 4 years is needed to prevent a crisis intervention. The Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi says the approval process for foster carers is among the issues.
Currently, we have about 80,000 foster care places, of which about 20%, so 17,000, are not available for some reason, right? We have over 100,000 people inquiring about becoming foster carers, but very few actually complete and get through. I want to work with local government to see how we improve that conversion.
A Ukrainian court has sentenced a 21-year-old Russian soldier to life for killing an unarmed civilian. It's the first war crimes trial since the Russian invasion began. The UN Refugee Agency says 6.5 million people have now fled the country. Two football fans have been charged after crowds stormed Manchester City's stadium. Thousands of home supporters ran onto the pitch after City sealed the Premier League title against Aston Villa. One of the charged men's accused of throwing a missile. Police say they're still investigating the reported assault of Villa goalkeeper Robin Olsen, who was hit in the head. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Anybody who's seen The Wolf of Wall Street knows the characterisation of the banking world of yesteryear. A hedonistic bacchanalian boys' club drunk on money and power, smashing up supercars, tanking drugs and sexual impunity galore. Well, after the financial crisis, it's fair to say the city and the financial sector has worked quite hard on cleaning up its act. But what is it about privilege and permissiveness and the subsequent scandals that go hand in hand? And is this the reason why every day we're opening the papers to the latest Pestminster headlines? But far from the often characterised dinosaurs club steeped in misogyny, of the 1 in 7 MPs currently under investigation for sexual misconduct, a truly astonishing figure. The central theme of the stories coming to light in the media is accusations of drugging and abuse within homosexual circles. Is it because there's still a culture of oppression and taboo in politics? And if the city managed to clean its act up, what needs to be done so Westminster can do the same? Well, the former Conservative MP Imran Ahmed Khan is due to be sentenced this afternoon after being found guilty of sexually assaulting a teenage boy in 2008. He was expelled from the party within hours of his conviction and later resigned from Parliament, triggering a by-election in Wakefield to be held next month. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood has this report.
I'm here because I'm standing for Parliament.
For a while, Imran Ahmed Khan appeared to be the potential darling of the Conservative Party. He was a committed Brexiteer, the grandson of a miner, a father born in India. He seemed to represent a new conservatism, one at ease with modern Britain. He was Wakefield born and bred, and in 2019 finally managed to defeat that constituency's long-standing Remainer MP Mary Cray.
Great to be back. Great to start the campaign.
The seat had been Labour-controlled since 1932.
I will do it again, but I'll do anything for the constituents of Wakefield.
Morning, sir. But last year, Khan was charged with a historic sexual offence, accused of groping a 15-year-old boy in 2008. The victim said he'd felt scared and vulnerable as Khan forced him to drink, watch pornography, and then attacked him. The jury decided he was guilty. Following his conviction, it took around 3 weeks for Khan to finally submit his letter of resignation. It's thought that he collected his MP salary in full for the month of April. But for many here in Westminster, the real scandal is the culture within the buildings behind me, the seemingly endless stream of sexual assault allegations, and ultimately the character of those whom we elect. Amazingly, despite his crime, Khan was supported by a fellow Tory MP, triggering a fresh row. Former committee chairman Crispin Blunt later said he'd step down at the next election.
I do think that in every walk of life you will come across people whose behaviour is not what you would expect, it's not appropriate, and it doesn't just live in Westminster, in other businesses as well. But it's what we do about it, and unfortunately we've seen a slew of complaints being made against sitting members of Parliament and no real plan as to how we're going to protect the people that are working there.
Mr. Khan has no comment.
Since Khan's conviction, a string of new claims have emerged about the conduct of other MPs.
Any word for your victim, Mr. Khan?
Yet more exasperated questions about how to fix Westminster's rotten culture. Tom Harwood, GB News.
Well, we will bring you an update on this story if Amran Ahmed Khan is sentenced in the next hour. Well, let's discuss the culture in Westminster, first with Gina Miller, who's leader of the True and Fair Party, which campaigns to clean up politics. Gina, fantastic to have you on the programme. In my introduction there, I compared the culture today in Westminster, or perhaps for a long time in Westminster, to the sort of stereotype of the culture that was once attached to the City of London. Can you see parallels?
Well, before my political activities, I've been in the city since 1996, so absolutely I can. And I think we've got to see the same sort of changes that happen in the city. So that's, transparency. We've got to have more awareness, which we're seeing already, of what's going on. We have to allow whistleblowing channels to operate. We've got to be able to put in checks and balances. In the city, we put in things called senior management regimes. We actually have duty of care. I mean, it's not perfect in the city, far from it. There's a lot more that we need to do to end the rip-offs and the behavior we have in the city. But in politics, you would have thought it'd be better there. But unfortunately, there are lack of checks and balances. But there is this sort of idea that debauchery in the corridors of power is allowed because once you're there, there's nobody who keeps you to account and holds you to account. And that's what we've got to change.
I mean, there are currently, I believe, 56 MPs being investigated for sexual misconduct, which suggests to me that there is some sort of whistleblowing mechanism and a watchdog in place. Is there something else intrinsic to this that connects the City of London? The idea of power, privileges, perhaps the backgrounds of some of the people drawn to this profession, which leads them to potentially act with impunity?
Well, can I say, on your point on whistleblowing, some of these 56, 58 crimes we're hearing about now happened as far back as 2002. So actually, it's taken a long time. It's because public awareness on these issues are now increasing, and that's why people are allowed to speak. So it hasn't been there. The bullying culture that stopped people from speaking out is very much there. But it's this combination of power, but also the idea that it's unaccountable. And if you look at the backgrounds that people in the particular parties are coming to the top, they do seem to come from a very privileged background where there's this sort of, it's called the Bullingdon boy type culture. And that's what I think is really difficult for good people going into politics, is that they're being drowned out by those who are perpetrating a bad, rotten debauchery, a culture of debauchery throughout our top levels of politics.
I mean, very often when we talk about Pestminster or have this idea of debauchery in politics, it's often attached to the concept of misogyny. But what struck me, actually, if we look at sort of some high-profile things that have landed in the media, there's been another MP arrested on allegations of rape. That was apparently a male MP raping another man, allegedly raping another man. There was a big story in the papers, in some papers this weekend, of a senior Conservative politician who's been accused of using date rape drugs against 4 other people, again, men. And then, of course, one of the big historic high-profile cases was, of course, Keith Vaz and the procurement of rent boys. It does seem to me that there's a thread here, that this is rife among homosexual circles. Is this also down to a culture potentially of taboo and oppression?
It's a moral vacuum that seems to be, it's not even what we would consider, low levels of behavior that's dubious. This lacks any sort of moral compass. But as you say, it seems to be centered around how extreme can behaviors become. Date rape drugs in our corridors of power, cocaine being used, drink being used, all the things that we have tried to clean up in society are happening in Parliament. These are things that should shock every single person, irrespective of which party you're in or which party you voted for or where your politics lie. This is about outing what's going on in Parliament and ensuring that these sorts of behaviours are not allowed.
Yeah, Gina, I couldn't agree more. It's shocking, it is indeed. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. Gina Miller there, who's the leader of the True and Fair Party, who want to clean up politics. Well, joining me for the show today is the one and only Christopher Hope, who's the Associate Political Editor at the Daily Telegraph. I mean, Christopher, this is astonishing stuff, isn't it? It does seem to ring of some sort of culture in Parliament that is, well, pretty astonishing.
There's a coming together, Alex, of a number of issues here, aren't there? You've got more confidence from victims to complain because there's now protests in place since 2018. As Gina said, those 56 or 58 cases you mentioned, that's in totem have been put into this complaint system. So it's not like suddenly a huge surge. I think there's also a problem with a culture of MPs. They've got no boss. Their boss is the public. They get an appraisal every 5 years. Otherwise, they're in charge in Parliament, like a small business with money to employ people. And I think there's no kind of checks and balances. There might be on you, say at GBNews, you can't go and do certain things, you can't throw your weight about in the same way that MPs possibly can, because no one can sort of say that's out of order. You can't talk to someone like that, or you can, and certainly that really is crossing the line in terms of how you behave after a few drinks. So I think that's why one of the ideas that Lindsay Hoyle is looking at is to bring staff who work for an MP who's got question marks. If there's a pattern of issues there on these complaint hotline, bring them directly employed by the House of Commons, so there's a direct way to complain. What we're talking about, of course, is power. It's always about power. All this kind of thing is about power, and it's someone in a powerful position exerting that power over somebody else for their own gain, and essentially politics is power. So I think you're more likely to have this kind of activity. But I think the reason why you're seeing more cases than normal is because there's more confidence of victims that they'll get listened to.
Is there not also the case that perhaps people, especially younger members of staff, may not always conduct themselves with professional decorum because these people are not paid proper wages? Let's be fair.
They're paid wages.
They're paid wages, but to live in London, very, very low wages. And as a result, I get the impression that a lot of people are harvested from quite wealthy backgrounds where they can afford to live on a tuppence in London, have probably gone to prestigious universities, been part of student party organisations, youth wings and so forth, and bring with them a culture where they then end up in an environment where you've actually got bars on the parliamentary estate and it's all a jolly old time.
Well, there is a Red Lion pub where I do a weekly podcast from, just 50 yards from the gate of Parliament, so I wouldn't get too hung up on the issue of bars in Parliament. But certainly there is an idea that you don't hang around if you're a researcher. You do that for a couple of years and move into a think tank or business. I mean, it's a progression, isn't it? And I think the issue is one of power, as I say, and abuse of that power in private spaces. And that's where I think there's now more confidence that you can get a good hearing if it happens. But it does also attract people who, let's face it, want to be Prime Minister. I mean, you know, I've been taken just aside by MPs saying, have I got a chance? And I've said, what do you mean? You know, a chance? Oh, to be leader? Yes, of course you have. Write me a pledge card. But I mean, I think they do feel themselves as they are, and then that can bring behaviour which is difficult.
And people who potentially not from what, you know, some folk might call the real world, the people who, you know, would be brought up in a school circle or, you know, in a family background or in other jobs where you couldn't drink on the job, where it'd be completely unthinkable to have a pint at lunchtime or hang around in a bar until the division bell goes.
Mm. Yes, that is unusual, and certainly there's a different tone of the place. If you go along to a 10 p.m. vote and sit there in the House of Commons, everyone's chatting, you don't need to wear office clothes to vote at 10 p.m. for various reasons. It does feel more informal. I think that can lead maybe to, you know, it's a workplace, no question. And we saw that with the MP who was looking for tractors and came across a porn site in his workplace. Clearly a big issue in any office doing that anyway. And for many, a big issue doing it anywhere, otherwise outside that. But I think there is definitely a tonal issue which can be crossed.
Christopher, thank you so much for your insights. I want to know your views on this. Are you as astonished as I am? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet the programme @gbnews. You're with GB News on TV and radio. After the break, we'll be talking about the spread of monkeypox in the UK and the new isolation guidance for those who become infected. But first, let's have a look at the weather forecast.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A day of bright spells and heavy showers for many, but it's going to stay cloudy and damp in the southeast for much of the day. A weather front is moving through here. It's moving up from the south and it's really just staying still for a time before eventually the more showery airflow pushes through from the west and across Northern Ireland, parts of Western Scotland, those showers already breaking out. Southwest England, Wales, Northern England and much of northeast Scotland also seeing some heavy downpours through the afternoon. Some brighter and drier spells for the Midlands, for central parts of England, but it stays cloudy, damp and fairly cool for East Anglia in the southeast. At best, 17 or 18 Celsius, I think, here. And 15 to 18 degrees elsewhere, but at least it'll feel more pleasant with some brightness in between the showers. Showers or longer spells of rain move through southern parts of the UK overnight, and some persistent rain there for northeast Scotland for the first half of the night as well. For many, again, clear spells in between the showers, and it's a cool night to come with temperatures dipping into the mid to high single figures in most spots. So for the start of Tuesday, some persistent rain close to the northeast of England, southeast Scotland. Showers from the word go across central and southern England, and really it's another day of sunshine and showers, with the heaviest downpours for the southern half of the UK, with the risk of hail and thunder in places, and temperatures getting up to 15 to 18 Celsius. Into the evening on Tuesday, the showers continue for a time. Eventually the focus for showers pushes east, drier and brighter weather for a time from the west, with clear spells developing overnight, and another cool night to come. Now Wednesday's a blustery day with a strong breeze and some outbreaks of rain in the north. Thursday and Friday, further showers to come.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Quarantine, a word previously only applied to pets with rabies, but one we're all too familiar with, repackaged in perhaps a more palatable form of self-isolation after a novel coronavirus started a global pandemic. Well, the stay-at-home order is back as contact tracing is underway across the world to pinpoint people who may have been infected with monkeypox. A previously little-known virus from Africa passed to humans from infected animals is spreading around developed countries, with allegations the nexus of infection was a pride festival in Gran Canaria, with the virus now largely circulating between gay and bisexual men, according to the United Nations Programme on HIV and AIDS, which also warns against an outbreak of homophobic headlines to match. The UK has so far confirmed 20 cases, with more than 80 now identified across Europe, the US, Canada, Israel and Australia, suggesting its spread is far greater. Those potentially exposed are now being told to isolate for 3 weeks. So, does this latest zoonotic virus have the capacity to wreak havoc COVID style? Or are we all too enthralled by sensationalist scaremongering? Dr. Bharat Pankania, who's a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School, joins us now. Bharat, great to have you on the show. First of all, monkeypox, should we be frightened? How severe is it?
Whilst it doesn't cause severe illness in most people, we need to be careful that in the younger age group, it may cause severe illness, as well as in immune suppressed and other groups of people, such as pregnant women. So yes, we have to be careful, but overall, in most people, it will not cause a severe illness, we hope. There's a lot to learn about this new outbreak, new international outbreak. We're learning every day, but on the basis of our current knowledge, we know what we know, which is younger age group, immune suppressed, pregnant women, extra caution. Most people, it is self-limiting, but we can't just allow this infection to have a runaway course.
I mean, the geographic spread is already quite remarkable, which suggests to me that it could have been, you know, circulating within communities in the UK for quite a while undetected, if it's managed to get itself in most corners of the world. Would that be your read of the situation?
No, and I'll tell you why. You see, the signs and symptoms of monkeypox are so specific and so dramatic, it wouldn't just go under the radar undetected. It's not like you've got a influenza-like illness which you discounted and never thought about it. Once you've got those, the appearance, it's a very sequential appearance, you see, macules, papules, pustules. So it's a little rash, and then it's very specific, well-defined, and then it's a little pimple, and then it is a pus-filled pimple, and lots of it, head, neck, face, arms. And you would not ignore that because it's so dramatic, so specific. So I don't think it has been around and undetected, and we're only picking it up now.
So let's talk about the signs and symptoms there. Is it the case that if you're infected, you'll definitely get that rash, the pustules and so forth?
No, not at all. Of course not, because some people, for whatever reason, mount a superb immune response and nothing appears. And some people get the full-blown infection. And interestingly, now that you've asked this question, let me digress and say a little bit more. So if you are, for example, aged over 50, you will have encountered the vaccinia virus vaccine, which we used against smallpox. And there is cross-immunity between smallpox and monkeypox. So these people, if they've still got viable immunity against smallpox, will mount an immune response and not show the full blown-up monkeypox infection. They may be able to encounter it, not show any signs, and recover.
And so in that respect, would they still be able to potentially pass it on? Could it mean that there are cases going undetected?
Potentially. We don't know. But my answer would be, thinking empirically and from first principles, is yes, it is possible to pass it on empirically without knowing about it, especially if you do not mount the full immune response. But the bottom line is, at this stage, we don't know. That's the truthful, honest answer.
And very briefly, should we be worried, or is this sort of more sensational headlines than something that is going to be the next COVID?
It should not be the next COVID, and I expect the UK Health Security Agency, what a name we've got, to be able to manage this. And if they don't, I would like to ask questions, why not? So it is a case of identifying possible, probable, confirmed case, identifying their contacts, sequestrating both, keeping an eye on them, supporting them. Early, extensive action prevents a wide-scale outbreak. We should be able to do it, and I expect that we will.
Dr. Bharat Pankhania, fantastic having you on the programme again. Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Well, let's go back to Associate Political Editor at the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope. I mean, it's got all the makings, doesn't it, of great clickbait. You know, are you going to catch this horrible new virus which covers you in pustules? But at the same time, it also carries with it a risk because of the sort of communities within which it seems to have been prevalent so far of creating stigma and taboo, the likes of which the UN AIDS organisation has spoken about.
That's the worry. I mean, it's not. We are so we're almost triggered, aren't we, by the question of being locked down or forced to isolate for 3 weeks, as in the case of being exposure to monkeypox. But there are only, I think, 20, a few more only cases in the UK. It's very low numbers, and it's more of an easily understood virus in the same way that COVID wasn't. It can be dealt with, as the medic there was saying, by being treated properly. So, and it does seem to have so far being confined to certain groups of the country or the population, and I think it hasn't not spreading widely in the population yet.
Yeah, I've just understood that apparently this situation is being discussed currently at Davos. So it clearly is triggering some alarm around the world, isn't it? And I mean, does that seem to you to suggest that we've become far more alarmist about the possibility of zoonotic viruses, pandemics, possibly overreactive?
Well, let's hope we are overreacting. But I mean, the people are just so jumpy about this. We're still waiting. There could be other variants of COVID-19 we don't know about. We're probably going to go through a 3rd or 4th jab for most of the country this autumn. It's now part of the conversation, isn't it? We understand what it's about. People are traumatised by COVID, I think, and that is maybe that might be informing some of the reporting of this. It does seem to be a small issue. It can be dealt with. It doesn't seem to be threatening lives, according to the doctors so far. But what's concerning is how is it spreading so easily at the moment through different groups of people.
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of people wanting those answers. Christopher, thank you. You're at GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, the cost of living crisis. Boris Johnson reiterates he's not a fan of taxes as Labour push again for a windfall tax. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister says he's not in favour of new taxes to ease the cost of living crisis. But as pressure grows to introduce a windfall tax on oil and gas companies, Boris Johnson says no options off the table.
I'm not attracted intrinsically to new taxes, but as I've said throughout, we've got to do what we can, and we will, to look after people through the aftershocks of COVID, through the current pressures on energy prices that we're seeing post-COVID and with what's going on in Russia.
Downing Street has confirmed the meeting between the Prime Minister and Sue Gray during her investigation was first suggested by Number 10. Officials say Boris Johnson discussed the timings and publication process of her findings into lockdown breaches. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the meeting was an attempt to undermine the report.
I always had a concern that as we got to the publication of the Sue Gray report, there would be attempts by the government to undermine her and undermine the report. And that's what we've seen going on over the weekend in recent days. A new low for the government. What we do know is there was industrial-scale law-breaking in Downing Street, over 120 fines. So what we need now is the full report, all of the evidence. It's the least that the public are entitled to from this government.
A health worker has been arrested on suspicion of poisoning a child who died at Birmingham Children's Hospital on Thursday. The 27-year-old has since been released pending further inquiries and has been suspended by the hospital. Scotland has confirmed its first case of monkeypox. That brings the total number of cases in the UK to 21. The government is advising people who are at high risk of catching the disease to isolate for 21 days. The UK Health Security Agency says anyone who's had direct exposure with a confirmed case shouldn't travel and should avoid pregnant women, children and the immunosuppressed. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, it's 1973 all over again, according to headlines. A stagnant economy about to tip into recession, soaring inflation driven in part by grotesque energy costs, meaning millions now face crisis while the government wrings their hands wondering what to do about it, pretending none of it is their fault. But it is their fault. After decades of dreadful policy making, leaving a ticking time bomb of financial misery. One top economics wonk is set to tell Davos things could go south very quickly in a way that makes the financial crisis of 2008 look like a dry run. But maybe 1970s UK actually had it easy. Back then, it took 2.5 years for people to save for a deposit for a house, with the average buying age 25. Today, it's a decade, while people take until their mid-30s to get on the property ladder. In the 1970s, the pay difference between bosses and workers was at a ratio of 20-1. Today, CEOs rake in 63 times of those at the bottom. And back then, national debt was around half the country's GDP. Today, it's a deeply scary 94.6%. So where has all the money gone? Well, it wasn't Mr. and Mrs. Miggins spaffing it up the wall, but it'll be their homeless kids without a pot to do the proverbial in who'll have to bear the brunt. So what is the solution to tackling the deepening cost of living crisis? Well, this morning, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer reiterated his call for a windfall tax on energy firms.
Part of the answer is staring the Prime Minister in the face, and that's Labour's plan for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies and using that money directly to reduce bills by up to £600 for those who need it most. But what's the government doing? It's dithering, it's delaying. Last week they voted against a windfall tax. Now they're saying they're looking at a windfall tax. They need to get a grip of this situation, because every day they dither and delay, more people are struggling, really struggling with their bills.
But during a visit to a school in southeast London this morning, the Prime Minister said he didn't support the introduction of new taxes to ease the cost of living crisis.
No option is off the table. Let's be absolutely clear about that. I'm not attracted intrinsically to new taxes, but as I've said throughout, we've got to do what we can, and we will, to look after people through the aftershocks of COVID, through the current pressures on energy prices that we're seeing post-COVID and with what's going on in Russia. And we're going to put our arms around people just as we did during the pandemic.
Well, today, a leading think tank, which was set up by the Conservative MP Ian Duncan-Smith, has set out what it believes will ease the deepening cost of living crisis. Matthew Greenwood, who is the head of debt at the Centre for Social Justice, joins me now. Matthew, fantastic to have you on the programme. I mean, it seems to me that in the last 50 years. We've gone money mad. We've been printing it, spending it, we're owing it. I mean, surely all of this is contributing to soaring costs of inflation, national debt off the scale, and ordinary people having to carry the can.
Well, we do have a problem with inflation right now, but I think that what we really need to consider is those at the very bottom of our society, right? The Centre for Social Justice is calling on the government to do what it can, as Boris Johnson says he wants to, and call an emergency fiscal event, a budget if you like, to put those at the bottom, at the heart of where he's going. And we think that means encouraging people into work. The government have got a costed £733 million tax cut for those on universal credit and in work, courtesy of the Centre for Social Justice. He can also upgrade universal credit so that it's in line with inflation, so that people have the capacity to work. And I think those things would do a lot to help people who are at the bottom deal with this inflation that we're so worried about.
I mean, one of the arguments in the government is actually giving people more pounds in their pocket could actually fan the flames of inflation. Do you buy that argument at all?
Well, so I think we do need to be concerned about inflation, but I don't think that we need to be so worried that we're actually putting ourselves in a situation where we don't help those at the bottom. Because, inflation or not, those at the bottom are struggling. And we've spoken to people across the country, and you're hearing tales of people who are saying that they are shoplifting basic food essentials. We're hearing tales from credit unions, those who lend money to those on the lowest incomes, that people are asking for loans to live. And I think this is something that Treasury really needs to take note of, because credit unions are struggling. And if we don't do something about that and rewrite the legislation to allow people to borrow when they need to, we could be dealing with a lot of illegal moneylenders.
Now, you are a Conservative-leaning think tank. Maybe it's time for some more radicalist socialist-style policy making. I mean, the fact that today big bosses are being paid 60 times more than their lowest-paid workers, which is, 3 times greater than it was 50 years ago, suggests that the distribution of wealth is a significant problem.
Well, there is a real problem with the distribution of wealth. I think it's true that the people at the top do get paid a lot more than those at the bottom. But we have a welfare system that is in place that is world-class in the form of universal credit, that is able to make work pay, that is able to redistribute income from the state to those who need it most. And that's something that the government ought to be looking at.
Matthew Greenwood, thank you ever so much. The head of debt at the Centre for Social Justice. Well, Christopher, I'm no economist. I really find it difficult to get this stuff. But it seems to me that the magic money tree has one particularly poisonous fruit, and that fruit is inflation.
Correct, that's the worry. And the worry is even worse than that as well. It's stagflation. It's inflation with no growth. And that's the concern amongst Tories I speak to, is how do you get growth going? The idea that Ian Duncan-Smith is pushing around, he of course founded that think tank you're just talking to there, he just wants to try and get the government to cut taxes and channel money into the pockets of those on the lowest income bracket. He thinks you can do it through universal credit, although some of the benefits can't be tweaked mid-year. The other idea that George Osborne mentioned at the weekend, quite a good idea, I think, is pushing money into these lower income brackets through council tax, through the higher ABCD bands. And that's a way of getting money into the pockets of those who need it, while also cutting taxes and making the UK look more attractive. What a lot of Tories don't wonder, when I speak to them, senior Tories say to me, why are we not making this country more attractive to inward investment? Why are we not going a bit further by cutting taxes, making us look more attractive compared to the European Union? That's where you get money into this country from outside the country, and that'll bring down the debt.
Yeah, you do wonder when they're going to start hanging the Brexit baubles on the magic money tree.
Right.
Christopher, thank you ever so much. Now, Frankenfoods, the name accorded to genetically modified crops by people opposed to man messing about with nature. Well, today the government is giving the green light to genetically engineered plants in order to help avert a looming food crisis, as Putin gambles with global food shortages by blockading shipments of grain and fertilizer, largely destined for the undeveloped world. Where there's famine, there's often fighting. But do we have anything to fear the forces of science, able to do clever things to dodge nature's disasters, such as plagues of locusts, drought and pestilence, while producing crops with far higher yields and longer shelf lives? Can these laboratory-fangled foodstuffs pose grave risks to human health or the natural ecosystems Mother Nature carefully oversees? Or is this just the mastery of human innovation, the likes of which we often applaud in medicine, desperately needed as the world may soon not be able to feed itself without pretty radical intervention? Well, let's talk to David Rose, Professor of Sustainable Agricultural Systems at Cranfield University. Professor Rose, fantastic to have you on. Where do you stand on genetically engineered crops? Is this something we need to be pushing ahead with, fit for the 21st century, or is it fit for a Gothic novel?
I think it's definitely one potential medium-term solution to some of the challenges that farmers are facing. There are people, quite rightly, with legitimate ethical concerns that should be heard, but we have a real cost of production crisis in this country for food. So if we can make varieties of both crops and animals that are more productive, rely on less pesticides and fertilizers to grow, then it's good for farmers and potentially good for consumers as well.
I mean, are there inherent risks to something like GE crops? Because it strikes me that we've been breeding things to be better than their predecessors since we first developed farming, in Mesopotamia. And that, if you can have a prize-winning rose or, a giant marrow, then what's the difference in having wheat that's less likely to be affected by drought?
So you're right, we've been doing selective breeding for centuries. Now, gene editing is different, and also gene editing is different from genetic modification. So a lot of people's concerns about genetic modification is when we're inserting foreign DNA into a crop. Gene editing is where we make much more specific changes. We don't insert foreign DNA. So it's a different process. We've been doing, as you say, selective breeding for centuries. So it's just really a means of creating varieties of crop and breeds of animals that are more productive, more resistant to pests and diseases, and that can help the farmer, but it could potentially also help the consumer.
And so just finally and briefly, do you see any inherent risk in gene editing, or would you say let's crack on with it?
Well, I think there are, people have ethical concerns about maybe some seed companies who have a monopoly on the technology, retaining power and control. There are some concerns that it could lead to the greater intensification of farming. But I think the bigger concern is the faith that the government are placing on gene editing to get us out of the current problems facing farmers. So there's a huge cost of production crisis. Gene editing is not a short-term solution. Regulations don't allow it to be used. So there's going to have to be legislation passed that will take some time. Then there's going to need to be scientific trials, which take some time. Then the seeds are going to need to produce, which farmers are going to have to buy and roll out. That will take some time. So the chief scientific advisor at DEFRA said in January that it was at least 5 years away in this country from being able to buy genetically engineered crops. So it's not a short-term solution to some of the cost of living and the cost of production crises that we face. So yes, in the future could bring benefits, but there's a whole raft of other tech and non-tech solutions that we're going to need to be able to meet the food production challenges that we face.
David Rose, thank you ever so much. Professor of Sustainable Agricultural Systems at Cranfield University. Well, we're joined now by Liz O'Neill from GM Freeze, a group which campaigns for a moratorium on GM food and farming in the UK. Now, we've just had to explain that GM and GE different. One is putting fish cells in tomatoes and the other's doing a few tweaks on something's DNA to help it grow better without introducing foreign DNA. But do you hold GE in the same level of contempt as GM?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't use the word contempt at all, other than that the government has contempt for the public, who said that they don't want this and who said very, very clearly last year in the government's own consultation that the exact deregulation that they're now proposing was something they didn't want to see. But what we need to bear in mind here is that gene editing is GM. It's GM in law and it's GM in science. It's GM with better PR. It's a whole new group of techniques that are, very slightly different in the way that they work, but they hold the same relationship with our food as the GM that has been around for over 20 years. It is allowing developers in the lab to change the DNA directly and to make a lot of assumptions about what's going to happen there. The difference with conventional breeding is that you breed the plants and you see what happens. You actually look at the plants, you see how they perform, and that's how you choose what you want to do. This idea that you can rush ahead and change the genome directly and all will be well relies on making huge assumptions about what you've done and what impact it will have. And unfortunately, those don't bear out. And that's why GM Freeze and many other organisations are, defending regulation. We're defending the safeguards that are in law. And there's some stuff that I want to pick up on what was said earlier. It's perfectly legal to grow or to go through the process and apply to grow GM crops in the UK already. What they are is regulated. They're not banned. And so what the government's proposing is getting rid of all of those safety checks, and they want to allow certain, very new, really still very experimental GM techniques to be used without any kind of safety checks whatsoever. And that's what we object to.
Liz O'Neill, thank you so much for coming on the show, Director of GM Freeze. Well, Chris, I'm going to quickly come to you on this. I don't know if you've got a position on whether it's scary or not. It does strike me that when it comes to medicine, we sort of wave things through and say, isn't this great? The Pfizer vaccine using RNA from whatever, chimpanzees or whatnot. But when it comes to the stuff we're eating, people are a lot more worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of GM Frankenstein foods, as you call them at the beginning there, is not really there. There's gene editing, as you say, it's breeding things, making better. This is an example of Brexit, actually, because the European Union tried to regulate this area, GE, like it was GM, genetically modified, and its champions say it isn't at all. It's there's lots of checks. It's a way of generating better crops in this country through better editing of genes, not inducing foreign DNA into plants, which is what GM is. So I think it's, I think with all the checks, and we are pretty careful here in this country, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, love a bit of science. Thank you, Chris. Well, if I could give one top tip to the nation, it'd be this. Walk. It's one of life's cure-alls. If you can't sleep at night, get some fresh air and exercise during the day. If you can't afford the bus fare, why not try perambulation? The modern-day world doing your head in sees some precious pedestrian relief. Worried about your waistline? Walking just 1 mile burns 100 calories. I had a wonderful hike in England's bucolic hills yesterday, and I feel suitably soothed as a result. And what better way to walk than also enjoy some light communal catharsis during your constitutional? So you can always tune in to GB News Radio while you roam. The latest Twitter tug-of-war is all too predictably over our national flag, with the usual self-loathing sad sacks comparing the jubilant display of red, white and blue along the capital's main shopping thoroughfare like something out of Hitler's Germany. Why do these people have an obsession with comparing everything to Nazis? Here's the thing, though. If 21st century Adolf were to rock up on our shores in order to destroy the concept of a nation-state, as he did back then, it would be the job of patriots willing to die for their country to save the lives of the pathetic perverts who seem to hate it. And what is wrong with football fans? The dignified duty of the devotee of yesteryear, clutching a thermos of tea on a blustery terrace, living every goal of the bobbies and the nobbies, has been replaced by brawling hooligans who would struggle to find even a cell of integrity in their lager-bloated bodies. Well, if you have to part with half your salary to afford a ticket and the equivalent of a monthly shopping bill to watch it on TV, you may well treat the match like your last day on earth, while overpaid players rolling around like tantruming toddlers, kicking cats on camera while their exorbitant wives spend millions washing dirty laundry in public, are hardly the best role models. Perhaps if less vulgarity and money swirled about the once beautiful game, fans would also exhibit a bit more humanity. Christopher, any comments on those things?
Well, I think you can't take a thermos to a football game anymore. That would be seen as a missile, so you have to leave out the gate. You have to pour it away. I think I love bunting and flags. I mean, I have no problem with our house is bedecked, so we'll be bedecked at the end of next week in Jubilee bunting. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think the flag is simply a marvellous thing. It's a great thing, our union flag, and it's absurd to attack it.
Where did all this come from, though? The idea that your national flag or patriotism is akin to Hitler?
Well, I mean, I think there's a... Gosh, I do not know. I mean, I think Keir Starmer's trying to re-engage the... It's from the left, of course. Keir Starmer's trying to put patriotism at the heart of what the Labour Party stands for now, which is not before time, because that is where it should be. It shouldn't be attacking the flag. It's ridiculous. I don't know. I think in the past, maybe the English flag became a symbol of far-right views. Ridiculous, I know, but maybe that was part of it. And the idea of flags and nationhood and borders were a problem for some people. I would argue it's something to be proud of, and I think that's where we should leave it.
Yeah, I ordered my bunting off a well-known shopping website, probably made in China. Well, that's all I've got time for today. Coming up next is the briefing with Darren McCaffrey, and Darren is here. What is on today's programme, McCaffrey?
Very good afternoon, Alex. Coming up in the programme, we've got an interview with Boris Johnson that we have playing out today, also with Keir Starmer on politics, talking about Sue Gray and that report due out, but also talking about the cost of living crisis. We're going to be looking at violence in sport as well, after a number of incidents in football games, and also monkeypox. Should we be worried? That and much more, just a couple of minutes.
Well, do stay tuned, because Darren's going to give you all the latest on those big stories. That's all I've got time for. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News. Same time, same place, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Coming up, of course, it's Darren. First, though, let's have a look at the weather forecast.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's certainly been a showery start to the week for many of us. Some sharp downpours out there, more prolonged rain in some places, but there'll also be a few clear spells coming along overnight. Now, the more prolonged rain at the moment caused by a weather front that's close to the southeast, that does push away, but further showers or longer spells of rain are moving in from the west and northwest. And so that's during the evening, much of the UK seeing some heavy rain at times,